2025 has been a wild season thus far, producing some iconic moments such as Todd Kidd's back-to-back Ajax 200 wins, Diego Urquidy becoming the active Ajax Cup Series all-time wins leader in West Virginia, Shane Park scoring his first Oval win in nearly 2,000 days at the Stone Yard, and Braeden Bennett scoring his first Cup Series victory at Disney in just his 22nd start to snap Toyota's drought. If you want to cop any of those replica diecasts, head on over to Circle B Diecast/Plan B Sales and use coupon code ASCA to get free shipping on any orders $20 or more at checkout. Hello and welcome back to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode, and we got a lot to recap from a pretty wild weekend, standalone weekend for the ASCA Craftsman Series over in West Virginia under the lights, and then the Cup Series heading to Salt Lake for the first time. That race out in Utah. Both races were fun ones, and we learned a lot about really kicking off the second half of the season. Who are going to be the guys to watch, the guys to beat, who the pretenders are, that sort of stuff. And we got a lot to cover. Also, a lot in terms of silly season, in terms of the future of the sport, a notable name retiring. So a lot to go over in this episode. And we need to probably get right into it before this is an hour long. So first off, let's shout out the sports premium partners. You already know, Rowdy Energy. Click that link in the description. Head on over to the website. Go cop yourself Rowdy Energy to help you stay awake throughout the rest of this podcast. There's so many good flavors over there. And then Circle B Diecast/Plan B Sales. You want to cop the replica diecast that Todd Kidd just used to win the inaugural Workrun 200 at Utah Motorsports Park. Hey, head on over to Circle B Diecast/Plan B Sales and use free shipping on any orders. $20 or more with coupon code ASCA at checkout only inside the US. So once again, shout out Rowdy Energy, shout out Circle B Diecast/Plan B Sales, and yeah, let's get into it. So Todd Kidd, how quickly things change in this sport. We were heading into the Windows 300. Todd Kidd only had one victory to his name. He had only led, I think, 22 laps on the season. I actually think it was less than that. I think it was like 19 laps or something that he led on the season. It wasn't much. It was under 20 laps. I know that for sure. But obviously, he was right up there in the points chase with Diego Urquidy. He was not leading the points, but obviously, it's tight between those top two. And he only had the one win to his name. He, obviously that last lap accident, he was the huge beneficiary in the Ajax 200. So looking at that, and you're like, man, we've seen Diego be dominant at West Virginia. We saw Diego outduel Kidd in the Streets Computerville race. Diego, of course, the defending champion, a 4-time champion. You're thinking that he kind of has that leg up in his drive for five and hunt for that record-breaking 5th Ajax Cup championship. But Todd Kidd has responded. And furthermore to that point, there was also the rise of Shane Park. And we're going to get into that. But Shane Park's championship hopes they've completely diminished. I think they're about gone at this point. And kind of the collapse of the 2014 this past weekend. So we'll talk about that as well. But Todd Kidd has answered. He's responded to the haymakers that his teammate, Shane Park, has thrown at him. He's responded to the haymakers that Diego Urquidy has thrown at him. And he was obviously a lap away from securing the $1 million and finally winning the Ajax All-Star race. And there's that iconic moment between himself and Urquidy entering turn one on the final lap. They both wreck. Obviously, Kidd was incredibly frustrated by that. His goal early, you heard him talking to his crew chief about sending a message to Diego. He ultimately didn't need to do that because he outdueled Diego on the night and outdueled tactically he and Ronnie Woods Motorsports outdueled and outclassed Orchidi Bros Racing and were able to bring home a critical Windows 300 victory back to back for Todd Kidd and back to back 300s, back to back 200s. Like Todd Kidd has, for a guy that used to be the knock against him, besides the championship, was like he could never win the big races. These past 2 years, he has been untouchable in these big spots. 5 straight top two finishes in Crown Jewel events. But obviously, that's last week. So he wins that. So you head into Utah. There's a tie now atop the point standings between Kidd and Diego Urquidy. 8 races down, 8 to go. This was going to set the tone for how the second half of 2025 would be. It's a new track. So you would think that it's a very level playing field between Kidd and Urquidy. But early on, we saw on the weekend, Ronnie Woods Motorsports had the distinct advantage. And it was just, you look at the telemetry, the data, it showed in turns 1 and 2, you could see the Ronnie Woods Motorsports drivers, specifically the 9, the 24, and the 48, were just able to carry so much more throttle than anyone else through that section. And obviously, what they did for setup is confidential because they don't want that finesse, heading into next year's race. But the telemetry showed whatever Ronnie Woods Motorsports was doing in turns 1 and 2, that won them this race. Because through 3 and 4, the speeds were about equal, and you could see some Mike Y Racing guys like Jared Ayers and Bernard Ryder were matching and even besting the lap times between Kidd and Park. But through 1 and 2, the 9 was untouchable, and that kind of held station in the race. And once Shane Park, not him directly, but the team threw away the race in the pits, the digital dash was broken and giving him the wrong tachometer readings, multiple speeding penalties for the 24 team. And like I said, we'll get into that in a second, but that was the difference right there. And once Kidd got clean air, even before that happened, he was catching Park. I think he clearly had the fastest car. And once he got the clean air, it was over. Cameron Atwood tried to mount a charge at the end, and it would have been interesting to see, what would have happened had Atwood obviously got the full practice time in his primary car and got to qualify. I think he could have mounted a charge, but overall, Todd Kidd was just a man in another zip code and stepping up and performing when he needed to. He went from having one less win than his guys that he was competing for the championship against, and Urquidy and Park, and kind of being on the back foot, to now he's won back-to-back races, and now he has the most wins of anyone this season with 3. So he has stepped up to the plate these last 2 weeks, 2 big races, and he's made 2 big statements. And now we head to his home track, San Diego Speed Park. He obviously wrecked out of this race last season, but this is traditionally a track he runs extremely well at, his home circuit. I'm sure he's going to be glad to be back out in California again, go visit the folks this Saturday afternoon and get back after it. So, Kidd won that race in 2022. And if he can go 3 in a row, man, you're looking at with 6 races to go, Kidd on a 3-race win streak, he's gonna be borderline unstoppable. Obviously, it's still gonna be far from over, but the 9 team and Ronnie Woods Motorsports as a whole clearly have all the momentum. And I also wanted to kind of entertain this discussion a bit. Is it time to start putting Todd Kidd in that legend category? Because look at what he has done. And mind you, before I list out all of his accomplishments and his achievements throughout his illustrious decade-long career thus far, and again, we still have another 7 races to go, this is a guy who still has not had his 30th birthday yet. He's only 29 years of age. So I would think, he's probably got at least another 3 to 5 years in the prime of his career, which is a scary thought for the competition. And let's just go out and list the achievements. This guy is now a two-time Windows 300 winner, two-time Ajax 200 winner, 14-time Cup Series winner, tying Nick Orchidi and Dan Rogers for 8th on the all-time wins list. Fun fact, Kidd and Rogers are actually now tied for the most wins of any driver without an Ajax Cup championship to their name. So Kidd has an opportunity to best that mark if he can win at his home track in San Diego next week. Obviously, the 2015 Craftsman Series champion. But you just look at those accomplishments and what he's done. 8th on the all-time wins list at the age of 29. Diego also scored his 14th career victory at the age of 29. So keep that in mind. Like, Kidd is currently on Diego's pace. And we see where Diego is at now in his career. 27 career wins. He's only 34 years of age. Still going strong and competing for this championship. You know, he just continues to age like fine wine. And who knows, we could say the same about Todd Kidd in another 3 to 5 years. He could very well be up to that, I would say, Randall Woods, Diego Urquidy type echelon as one of the best to ever do it in the modern era. I actually think he already is one of the best to ever do it in the modern era. You know, he's taken that next step these past couple of years and just really coming into his own and maturing. And I don't know if it's, you know, the fatherhood aspect, the getting married aspect, but Todd Kidd has blossomed. He's obviously a superstar, but I think it's time to start having that legend conversation about him. And when you see the names that he's around on the all-time wins list, like Nick Orchidi, I believe, is a Hall of Famer. He will be a Hall of Famer once he officially hangs it up. Is Dan Rogers a Hall of Famer? That's debatable. Chico Bowden up there, 15 career wins. He's a Hall of Famer, former Cup Series champion back in 2008. Jimmy Hood up there, 18 career wins. We could be having a very serious conversation within the next couple of years of Todd Kidd equaling and potentially surpassing Jimmy Hood on the all-time wins list, which I know sounded crazy at the start of the decade, but that's just the meteoric rise Kidd has taken now that he's finally figured out how to win races and really manage these pressure situations. I think it's safe to say that he is the new face of the ASCA. So I think legend status is very much up there for Kidd, because even if he did retire right now, I think he's a Hall of Famer, even without the championship, which he's going to get one. We don't know if it's this year or next year, but he is going to win a title. At the rate he's going, he has to. He is going to win one eventually. So it's time to have that discussion. And that's if Kidd retired right now. He'd be a Hall of Famer. But again, we just talked about it. He's only 29 years old, not even in his 30s yet, and he's doing this. So huge victory for Todd Kidd. Absolutely massive. And on the other hand, let's talk about his fellow title protagonist, Diego Urquidi. And I think this is an interesting question to kind of pose here. Is the 4-time champion starting to crack under the championship pressure? Because we've seen these past few weeks, Diego, obviously, over the past couple years, he's gotten married again, and he's gone to therapy sessions, and he's calmed down. Because, you know, if you're a longtime viewer of the ASCA, Diego, far and away, used to be the biggest hothead in the sport. Any little thing that wouldn't go his way, he would pout, he'd throw a temper tantrum, he'd be crying, screaming over the radio, firing his crew chiefs, his entire pit crew left and right. He was, to put it bluntly, he was an entitled jackass, a spoiled brat. That's what Diego used to be. A spoiled brat that had a lot of talent, might I add. Obviously winning 3 championships prior to, you know, these past couple years. But since he met his new partner, he's gone to therapy, and he's finally, I think, begun to kind of mature and kind of put that entitlement, that arrogant nature kind of to bed a bit, I think. But we're starting to see it come out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more as the season wears on. And I think Diego is under probably the most pressure and the most stress he's been since, I would say, the 2022 season. And, you could argue 2023, he was also right up there, ready to win the championship before, I think Laquan pretty much ended his title run that year with the accident that you had in the closing laps of the Apple 225. That was it, because Diego was only one back of Atwood then. And then obviously the accident happens, and that pretty much, the title was over the next week. So, and then you look at last year, there was really no one that was on Diego's level. He really didn't have to race anyone. Obviously, he had to continue to put up results and put up one of the most consistent seasons in ASCA history with 10 top fives, 14 top tens, 2 wins. But we didn't really see Diego in many pressure situations. He didn't have his back against the wall. And this year, though, is a little different. We're kind of starting to see Diego with his back against the wall. We're starting to see him make some mistakes. And even though he had that incredible save on the opening lap of the Work Front 200, that was a mistake. He should not have been going that high up on the track. And you got to wonder, if he didn't, drop himself out of the top 10 on the opening lap, could he have matched Kidd? Could he have been a second? Could he maybe have competed for the win? I don't think so. I don't think he had the car at all, but you just never know. Diego put himself way too far back, and then got kind of lucky that Chris Barrymore and Carson Schmidt had their little incident there on the final restart. And we'll get into that in a bit. But we saw in the Windows 300, Diego lashing out at his pit crew for the slow stop. That did ultimately cost him the race. That's true. But this is not something that we had seen out of the more mature Diego from last year and the year prior to that, since he's going to therapy. I think Diego needs to woosah. He needs to do some yoga. He needs to calm himself down, because I do think that we're starting to see some cracks out of the 4-time champion. We're starting to see him revert back to vintage Diego and lashing out at his pit crew, lashing out at some of the incidents on the track. Like, he was livid with Todd Kidd after that incident. We saw early in the season when they collided at the Stonier, he was livid after that incident. So Diego I think he's starting to break a little bit. And I think that obviously the cure to that is certainly going to be winning. But until he does that, someone's got to calm him down. And his current crew chief, Sheldon Price, does an outstanding job of that, certainly over the past couple of years. But someone has to calm him down, because you're only 5 points back. We still got 7 races to go. We're heading to tracks that Diego's obviously won at in the past. He's never won at Denver, and he's never won at Belltown, but he's won at all the other tracks at least once, some of them multiple times. Looking at Ajax Super Speedway, the Stoneyard, West Virginia, that's a huge 3-race stretch for him. Computer, he's won there multiple times. So once we get past Denver, I think it's advantage Diego, just kind of based on his track record. But, obviously things are still very much up in the air at this point. So they just got to calm him down and let him know, hey, that drive for 5 certainly still alive, far from over right now. Ronnie Woods Motorsports may have the momentum, but all it takes is 1 week, 1 swing, and you can get it back. So that's really the deal for Diego right there. All right, next up, let's talk about the feud between Carson Schmidt and Chris Barrymore. And this is an interesting one because I think that these two are gonna get it sorted out. I don't see this as a long term, long standing rivalry. Honestly, I really don't. Um, you've got two drivers kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum here. Chris Barrymore is just, I think he's just frustrated. It's been a lost season since he decided to basically not show up and report to the team shop until less than a month before the start of the season. He has always had his mind on 2026. He obviously wants out of his father's team, and he's gotten out. He declined his driver option. He will race somewhere else next year. We don't know where, but rumors are swirling that it could be Tico Bound Motorsports. It could be Ronnie Woods Motorsports. Those are kind of the front runners right now. So we really don't know. And then as for Carson Smith, preseason, he was hailed as this next young superstar, only 22 years of age, currently the youngest driver in the Cup Series right now. Just inked a long-term extension to remain with Ricciardo Bears Racing. So his ride is stable. He's one of these rising stars, continuing to try to compete and kind of establish himself as one of the big boys in the sport throughout the rest of this decade. Whereas Barrymore is just kind of languishing. He's just kind of floating through the year. But obviously, he's running top five. He was running second at the time, having a great run, fantastic outing, and then he just kind of gets, dumped like that. So obviously frustrating on Barrymore's end, but realistically, I don't think there's anything Carson Schmidt really did wrong. Barrymore, we just saw the entire race, with this being a new track and one that stock cars haven't raced at in over 4 years. That outside lane isn't exactly cleaned off. And we saw that numerous times. So I think for this incident, this is just one that I think once these guys kind of calm down, they get through their they just got through their Monday morning debriefs. I don't think this is going to be much of an issue. I think it's just cooler heads need to prevail in this situation. It was a total racing incident, certainly not intentional by Schmidt because he ended up losing a top five, kind of based on what happened there. And for Barrymore, obviously it sucks. You're running second, you got a shot at the win, and you end up finishing the last car in the lead lap in 13. That's just kind of how the season has gone. It's a lost year, and it's a kind of it is what it is moment for Barrymore. Like you're not going to be racing here in 2025. You assume he'd be back in championship contention in 2026. Especially if he does go to Ronnie Lynch Motorsports, he will certainly be in title contention. But if he's going to sign with Tico Bound Motorsports, you'd assume that he's seen something out of their turbo hybrid engine development that he's like, okay, yeah, this team is going to be back next year. So, for Barrymore, I think it's just frustration boiling over of what's been probably the worst year of his career. But I don't think it's anything serious. And these two really shouldn't drag this out any longer, honestly. This is one that, it's just gonna be we'll forget this even happened in a couple weeks, honestly. It's not gonna well, we might see some retaliation considering San Diego's the next week, but after that, I think they're gonna put this to bed and kind of just move on from there. And speaking of moving on, let's move on to West Virginia, the Craftsman event this weekend. And in terms of the championship, not much really changed. Graham Darty had a big opportunity to claw himself back in the fight, but he blew it. His pit crew blew it. Uncontrolled tire penalty. And he only gets credit for a sixth place result. So he receives 5 points, which is a huge missed opportunity considering Tony Doval and Sean Wooden were not exactly on the top of their game. Obviously, they weren't awful. They both finished fifth and seventh, respectively, but that's not the top three, top two. We're used to seeing these guys kind of compete for wins. especially Del Valle this season. This is his worst finish of any race that he has completed all the laps in this year's fifth, which is ridiculous considering, again, he's only an 18-year-old rookie. Like, he's just that good. And Del Valle certainly, I believe, will be racing in Cup somewhere next season. Hearing some rumors that could be at Flores on the 23. We don't know this for sure, but um, he'll be racing somewhere in Cup within the next couple years. No doubt about that one. But the spotlight instead goes to another 18-year-old rookie that we haven't talked about enough, but has, I think, just as bright, if not even brighter future than Tony Del Valle II. And that would be Gunnar Thorson for Taylor Motorsports. And how ironic. The ASCA visits an NDRL sanctioned sanctioned, I can't talk, NDRL sanctioned circuit for the first time this weekend. And we see the NDRL first team kind of coming over to the ASCA score their first win in West Virginia. And that's kind of, where the NDRL is based in West Virginia, just out of Pittsburgh there. So it's a huge victory for Gunnar Thorson. Huge in kind of showing that he and Taylor Motorsports, they have arrived and they're going to be a thorn in the ASA competition side for a long time to come. Like, they're taking this deal seriously, man. And especially when you got a driver as talented as he is, you could argue he probably could have won last week's race as well had the incident between himself and Doherty not happened. And give Gunnar Thorson credit, man. When he caught Doherty on lap 11, he had an opportunity to send a message. He could have driven into that corner right behind Doherty, gotten him arrow loose, and shoved him directly into that outside wall if he wanted to, or at least gotten him arrow loose and slid him up the track. But he didn't do that. He ran his own race. He just got right up on the fence, right up on the boards where he was all night, ripped it right around the top and said, bye-bye, I'm out. And the rest is history. Although, even after that, Thorson still had more adversity to kind of overcome. Slow pit stop from his pit crew. He's lining up on the outside for the restart. And Thorson has the best restart I may have seen any driver have at West Virginia. On that outside, down into turn one, goes for an aggressive side draft on Toby Beckett. Toby Beckett pulls him back. They're side by side through the center of the corner, and Thorson masks the throttle, and he's going round the outside off turn two. And that kind of just sent the message for how the night went for Gunnar Thorson. Everything didn't go right, didn't exactly go to plan, but Thorson still executed. He waded through the adversity, and he is rewarded with his first career win and his first of many. Remember, this is only his 8th career start, and this kid has such a bright future, I think, in the sport, and so does Taylor Motorsports as well. Like I said, they're going to be a thorn in the ASCA side, for years and years to come. And we're starting to see the rise of this next youth movement. I keep saying this, but it's true. I mean, we already know Doherty is going to be racing at Cup for next season. Del Valle, we've seen what he's done. Thorson, we just saw what he's capable of. You got guys like Ian Adonde, 20 years old, Aiden Romo, 21 years old. Just so many talented young drivers in the Craftsman Series right now. And then you even got Akeem Dunham, 17 years old, qualifying outside pole, in his first start. Keep an eye on him. People say he has potentially generational talent, so the young drivers coming up right now are special. And I think that before the decade is out, the Cup Series is going to look vastly different, especially with some big names approaching their mid to late 30s. So, yeah, huge win for Gunnar Thorson. And remember the name, because he's going to be competing on Saturdays here pretty soon, sooner rather than later, I honestly do believe. So now let's move on to a pretty shocking story, I would say, that dropped Tuesday morning. Adam Petty Jr. announcing his retirement from ASCA competition at only the age of 28. And it's pretty shocking. And like I said, he's only 28 years old, not even 30. But um, Adam Petty Jr. is obviously, there were high hopes for him coming into the Cup Series at the same time that um, Chris Barrymore did back in 2017. We all thought that he would be the one that would lead Team Enterprises to prominence and not Greg Healy. Boy, how well that aged. 4 years in Cup and just nothing seemed to go right for him driving that 31, that second Team Enterprises entry. Lost Rookie of the Year and never won a race. And he had never won an ASCA race for obviously a really long time until 2023 rolls around. And Hood Motorsports is one of those kind of experimenting with that new Camaro. And they are firing out of the gates, rolling on all cylinders. And Petty goes out and dominates West Virginia to finally break through and score his first win. And now here we are, just a couple years later, and he's announcing his retirement. So I think for Adam Petty Jr., I think that it's important to remember this is not just a guy that was a Cup bust. This is a guy that finished at his peak, and you put him in championship level equipment, he proved that he could compete for a title. Third in points in 2023, obviously with that win in West Virginia, that was huge. And, while he struggled the past couple of years, the competition's just been so stiff at the Craftsman level. It's just so hard to compete, hard to be consistent. And that's why you're seeing the rise of this next youth movement, because they're going up against and beating this level of competition week after week after week. That proves that they're ready for the Cup level. So, for Adam Petty Jr., it's been quite the career, over a decade long. Again, he's only 28, so that means he started, way back in 2014 at the age of 17. And while he never really developed into the driver that we thought he would become. Still a very solid ASCA career and much longer than most drivers have in this cutthroat business. So respect to him, and hopefully he enjoys his time off now with his friends and family. And as for, you see one driver now on the way out, and now we see another driver inking a long-term contract extension to remain with their current team. And that would be rising star Braeden Bennett. 3 years, $33 million extension for Bennett to remain at Michael White Racing through the 2028 season. And this is a deal that just had to be done. Braeden Bennett, I think he's really kind of come out of nowhere. His rookie season is arguably one of the best of the modern era. And it just went so under the radar, I feel like, last year because Toyota went winless. So everyone was focusing on them going winless. They're focusing on the controversial release of Norm Lester from Michael White Racing, just kind of throwing him to the wayside with that team option deal and his contract. That was tough. But it kind of went under the radar that Braeden Bennett put up 4 top 5 finishes last year and 8 top 10s. And that 4 top 5 finishes number is crucial because that's more than Laquan Scranton had. That's more than Shane Park had. I believe that's more than Chris Barrymore had in his rookie year. I believe that ties the mark Todd Kidd had in his rookie year. Like, that number, 4 top 5 finishes, that shouldn't just be swept under the rug. Like, you generally do not see that out of a rookie. And then he finished, I believe, somewhere like just outside the top 10 in points as well. Like, And now he's obviously taken that next step. No sophomore slump in sight. Um, Won that race, finally snapping Toyota's winless drought at Disney in Orlando. And fourth in points as it sits right now. The 24-year-old has just done an incredible job developing. And this contract will take him through 2020 through when he turns 27, I should say. So I think Bennett, and that's one thing that is important to remember, is that Jared Ayers kind of had a similar rise through his first couple of years. He was fifth in points in 2020, mind you, fifth in points. And obviously, he has not even come close to that throughout the rest of his tenure. But Bennett is a different story. I think Ayers could have gotten back to that mark if he hadn't gotten into so much beef with so many different drivers. And now he's just driving way over his head. Ayers has never developed. He never grew up. He never matured. Bennett is a much more polished version of that. He's much more calculated. He has so much more skill, so much more racecraft, so much more tools in his toolbox to win these races. I have much higher hopes for Bennett being the future of Michael Racing than I ever did Jared Ayers. And especially when you consider that maturity level, Bennett is 3 years older than Ayers was in his sophomore season. He's only 2 years younger than Ayers as it sits right now, which is crazy to think about considering how experienced Ayers is at the cup level, but he still has yet to develop. While Bennett, I think, has clearly shown he's already surpassed that. And I think that if Michael Racing can supply him with the proper car, getting those turbo hybrid engines right, Bennett could compete for a championship next season. That that would be a crazy thought to say prior to the start of 2025, but looking at it right now, he's fourth in points ahead of the likes of Cameron Atwood, his teammate Randall Woods, his teammate Brent Reynard, highest paid driver in the ASCA, mind you. He's kind of the best of the rest because we know that Orchidi, Kidd, and Park are just on another level this season. I think Bennett has done an outstanding job, and he and Tony Delval II are going to be the future of Michael Racing and Toyota moving forward. All right, and finally, let's preview another standalone weekend for the ASCA. Before the first weekend of the new month, we'll be in the month of November now, and we're getting into the home stretch, man. We're only going to have 6 races left in Cup, 5 in Craftsman after this weekend. So it's starting to get down to crunch time, I should say. It's not crunch time yet, but we're getting there. And this next weekend is going to be pivotal, I think, for both series. And we'll start with the Craftsman series out again at Disney Motor Speedway. This race was an absolute madhouse last season. Absolute chaos. Graham Darty was leading the points, starting to pull away, but he got wrecked early on. You had Marcus Edwards looking like he was going to make a championship statement. He gets wrecked by his teammate while leading with 10 laps to go, Aiden Romo. And then Sean Warren comes out of nowhere and wins the race with Tony Delval II. Oh, the irony, considering they enter this edition as the top 2 in the standings. Going to be an interesting weekend. The early season race at Disney was certainly interesting with Aiden Romo finally breaking through with his first victory. Could we see Romo sweep the year at Disney, I should say? I think it's certainly plausible. Nick Painter should be one to watch. He's been obviously insanely inconsistent this season, but short tracks are he and Kurt Autosports' bread and butter. They get it right pretty much every single time they visit one. That Zero team is going to be up there, I think. Graham Darty, where's the speed in the 98? This is not we kind of expected them to flip the switch by now and really kind of go into overdrive and turning up a notch and lead some laps and win some races. And we just haven't seen that out of the defending champion. And he's running out of time. So Obviously, he's got the ride confirmed for TD Bros Racing next season, so he doesn't have to push. But if that team wants to defend their title and become the first in series history to do so, they need to show something. They need to win some races. And this is a big opportunity for them to do so, considering he did win the pole for at Orlando earlier in the season. Um, but I do think that this is a wooden and delve out kind of race. Again, they finished 1-2 here earlier. I should say in this race last year. I think that those two are going to be the guys to watch. And I think Graham Doherty's certainly going to give them some fits as well. But my pick to win this race overall, believe it or not, is neither of those three. It's Nick Painter. Nick was just so dominant at Orlando earlier in the season. I really think that he's going to get that win he probably deserved from earlier in the year, especially with no Cup drivers in this race. Um, I think Painter is going to make a statement here and continue his inconsistent nature, winning. Like his only top 10 finishes are basically wins at this point. So, yeah. So give me Nick Painter to win the Craftsman race, and then for Cup in San Diego, man. Obviously, it's a short track. So Greg Healy, Cameron Atwood, those are the two drivers that come to mind. But do you really want to pick Greg Healy right now? That three team is kind of, it looks like they're starting to be in turmoil right now. Like Healy, obviously incredibly frustrated. They were way off the pace in Utah. And that's just for a former champion to finish 2 laps down. That's just unacceptable. It just is. I don't care if it's a new track or not. You can't finish 2 laps down. So that team's in turmoil. I do not feel comfortable picking them even at a track that Healy has won at before. And speaking of that, Healy hasn't won here since his first career win in 2020. So this is not his track. I think it's much more of an Atwood track. He's won the past 2 races here. Todd Kidd obviously has won the past 2 races in general. His home track, he won here in 2022. The most recent winner, not named Cameron Atwood. He's certainly going to be one to watch. Diego Urquidy, a past winner here as well in 2019. He's going to be one to watch. It's really a toss-up, though. It's going to be an interesting race. Obviously, this is one that could be clean and green throughout. We only saw 2 cautions in this race last year, but then you flash back to 2023, the year before that, and only 9 cars finished the race, and there was a huge accident on lap 1. But that was a Monday afternoon race after a freaking tsunami hit California for the first time since 1939. So that entire weekend was just out there, to say the least. But overall, I think it's pretty straightforward. Cameron Atwood, he's due. He's led 271 laps this year, coming off a second place finish last week after starting 23rd. That 17 team has pace, man. And keep an eye on him. Also, dark horse, though, Braeden Bennett. Keep an eye on him as well. That could change, obviously, as we see practice results. And obviously, I upload my ones to watch on Thursday. So pay attention to Twitter to see that. But yeah, my picks for this weekend, short track aces, Nick Painter and Cameron Atwood to win this standalone weekend at these short tracks. It's going to be a fun one. But the ASCA, again, in 2 different parts of the country, we're going to learn a lot about these seasons as we're rolling through the second half of the season, beginning a new month. A lot of silly season stuff expected to drop within the coming weeks. Dexter Andrews Motorsports expected to announce their team lineup for next year. Who's going to replace the Quan Scranton in the 42? We'll discuss all that and more on the next edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. So this is Charles Fallon signing out.